Hey everyone online and everyone here. Thanks for joining us for Base's JavaScript Lunch and Learn. Today we're going to cover a cool thing called Svelte, and I'm about to switch to the presentation, but just so y'all know online, if you have any issues hearing, possibly because the microphone is down, let's move that back. Can you guys hear me online? No, that's never good. Let's see. Let's ask. Hey, how's it going? Welcome. Bueller? All right, well, while they get their stuff together, we'll go ahead and get started here. So I'm Mikhail Kozorovitskiy. I run Base. Base is the group that puts on these lunch and learns. We also do a drinking evening for networking, usually once a month. We didn't do one in January due to COVID. We will not do one in February as well, but starting with March, we will do one. I think Integrate is sponsoring the next one. So we go out to a brewery, hang out for a couple of hours, talk shop, and that's about it. Also founder of Datalus, which is my startup currently going through Velocity, and I'm the co-organizer of DevOps Days Alabama. Sorry, DevOps Days Birmingham, which is the only DevOps Days in Alabama. And today sponsoring us are TrustSpot and Innovation Depot, and we have TrustSpot here to tell us a little bit about the service. Do you want me to talk about? Okay, cool. So TrustSpot is a product review platform that goes out there and gets feedback from your customers through social proof. But you also send out surveys and stuff for
surveys. We capture user experience information through SMS and email and put it on any website.
And the cool part about it is it gets you your customers to review your stuff, so you know how you're doing, and also other people know how you're doing as well. It can integrate into your website. So cool stuff. Thank you guys for paying for lunch, which hopefully will be here soon. I don't know. They're only about 30 minutes late, so yay, Jimmy John's. Okay. So our topic for today is Svelte. Who here has heard of Svelte? Who here has used Svelte? Okay, cool. It's fine. Svelte came out in 2019, and it's a JavaScript framework. So why would you use it as opposed to one of the other frameworks like React or Vue or Angular? So we'll cover this in just a second. I just remembered that we did not check back to see how our online people are doing. So we have 2 people watching us. Hopefully you guys can hear us. Okay, awesome. Thanks. You're the best. All right, so back to our presentation. All right, so why would we use Svelte versus React or Vue or Angular? Svelte does something very special. It shifts a lot of the work to compile time. So there's a compiler that goes through your code in Svelte and spits out raw JavaScript. Very efficient, very high-performing JavaScript. Like the kind of stuff that we used to write back in the 90s. I don't know if anybody did that, but anyway. More importantly, it does not use a virtual DOM. So the way that React and Angular and Vue 1 through 2 work is that there is a virtual version of the website that it keeps inside your browser. I'm sorry, inside the browser memory. That's not what's displaying to you. And any kind of work you do on React, you're actually working against this virtual version of the website. And then there's a cycle, and every tick, it goes through and compares the changes between what's there virtually and what's on the page, and then makes those changes. Now, it's actually really, really fast, but it's very inefficient because it is constantly keeping a copy of the website, a second copy of the website in memory, and constantly doing work on it. So Svelte can also deploy static HTML and Node.js builds. So if anyone's familiar with Next.js, who here has used Next.js? Nope. Okay. Next.js is a React framework. Who here is familiar with React? Let's start. Sorry. Okay. So React is a front-end JavaScript framework that took over from jQuery and AngularJS. So some really old JavaScript technologies, but it had one drawback. React did not do server-side rendering, so it was only on the front end, single-page application, which meant that you couldn't really use it well for SEO. Now, Facebook that developed it first, that was fine for them because everything was behind a login. You're not really looking for SEO benefit. However, with normal websites, you really want to be able to for Google to index your pages, and you couldn't do that with React at first. And so then they made Next.js, which combines a server-side component. And so Svelte, even though it completely changes the way that the framework is built, it also has a server-side component. So it allows you to actually load the specific pages from the server side as if they were real pages. And maybe I need to take a step back even beyond that. Who here understands what a single page application is versus a normal website? Nope, cool. So a single page application is a website that has one entry point, meaning let's say you go to Facebook.com. It means that when you go to Facebook.com, the entire application sits there. And if you want to go to my profile page, that link is done internally in the application. It is not done in the URL. It shows up in the URL, but it doesn't work. So if you go straight to the profile page, it will not work.
Okay, that's it. Pretty much any framework of your modern framework.
This is true, except for Next.js and except for Svelte. Yeah, and so it's one of the requirements really to build a static page, right? You have that one ingress. So Svelte doesn't do that. It actually will load the dynamic paths from the server side, allowing Google to cache those and index those. So it's super useful if you're building, a website that needs SEO. Not useful if you're building something that doesn't, right? If you're building a blog or something, you really want that metadata to be indexed. So it's also easy to get started. A lot easier than this description, I promise you. And it works really fast. It is comparable to Vue 3, which is like the latest Vue in its speed, as far as the performance aspect of it. So that's why you would want to use it. It's easy, it's fast, it properly does SEO, and it shifts a lot of the work that frameworks do from the runtime to the compile time, allowing it to output really clean code. So that's, we already kind of covered that SEO portion. So underneath, in order to handle the server-side stuff, there's something called Svelte Kit, and it makes it super easy to do things with Svelte. Think of it as build, create, what's the React one? The create app? Create React app. So Svelte Kit is create React app for Svelte, except it already comes with a server-side bindings. And you can output the thing to static pages, and it will actually build out the static pages for you, or like Gatsby would, which is a React-based static framework. Or you can run a Node.js server in the back and run a dynamic application where you can talk to databases and stuff. And I'll show you guys an example application that does that, which is actually my Datalus website. So, all right. So, we have one more slide. So before we get started, we're going to see something called a .svelte file. And this is a special file that gets compiled into JavaScript. So it does special semi-non-JavaScripty things in it, but it also allows For that, it's because that extension is separate, you have various code extensions for VS Code and others to do like code complete and code syntax highlight. And then by default, we built to a static adapter, but I can show you guys how, if we have the time, how to switch it to Node.js. And then it repurposes a little bit of the JavaScript syntax and changes it a little bit. So I'll show you where it does that for some really cool functionality. And then to get started on this, you really need just Node.js, NPM, and some kind of IDE. And there are two ways to get started real fast. So Svelte has this amazing online help system, and we'll go through some of the code there because it has some real cool examples that we need to go over. And then, or you can do it and install it using npm and the svelte at next command, and lunch and learn is just my directory. So first, let's take a look at what's available on the Svelte website. So the easiest hello world example they have is they use let for the definitions and script tags. So we would say, let the name equal world, and then we can display that name down in code. If you're familiar with AngularJS, this is a lot how AngularJS works. Should I make this bigger? Whoops. Okay, no problem. We can. Ooh, too big. Is this all right? Cool. All right. So Svelte works by putting stuff in script tags, and they then process them. If you notice, my app is called .svelte, and so this is going to be compiled, using Svelte into JavaScript. And so we have a little bit of the result right here on the right. So let's go ahead and play with this. So if we define a variable called world, and we do that with let, we can then instantiate it with single curly brackets. So, and that gives us hello world. So that's the easiest one. So let's say we want to do something like so still simple, right? Where you just define a number. Well, what if we want what if we want to just double the number? Or sorry, that's not doubled. I don't know my math. Times 2. There we go. So we'll need to do a line break. So double. So that's cool. Well, what if we want to be able to change the number and have it update? So for that, we're going to need to get a little bit deeper in this. So let's see how to. So we can do an on-click like you would on other JavaScript frameworks. And then here we can define what we want to happen on that click. And on that click, let's say we just want, remember the syntax correctly, I think it's like this. And we can just do number. I believe that will, listener argument 2 is not an object. Oops. Forget my syntax here. It's if I want a variable. So the syntax. Nope. All right, let's go cheat. go to the tutorial. And so the tutorial is all built with this stuff, which is super cool. And we're just gonna go back to the tutorial piece that I wanna go over. There we go. Handle click. Sweet. But we want to do it this way. Not that number. Okay. We'll go with it. So in this one, they wrote the function. They didn't put it in line. So there is a way to do it in line, and I'll show you guys later on when I find the tutorial to do that. I don't actually use the inline, which is why I have a hard time remembering it, because it's really bad practice to do that inline. But you could just on-click and use the curly brackets to run a function. The function that you could then deploy up here. So in this case, what this does is it just increments the number of times clicked. Well, what I wanted to show you was, let's say we wanted to do that doubled, right? So let doubled equal count times 2, and then we'll display it down here. So as you can see, doubled is not actually changing because this does not get reprocessed. Whereas with React, this would change and it would update because it is constantly running through a loop. So because there's not this virtual DOM that's constantly sitting there refreshing your data, you have to manually tell it that you want it to update. And so Svelte has a really cool command for doing that. And it's an assignment operator that it's a $sign and then colon. And what it does is it says that if anything on the right side is updated, update the left side. So anytime count is updated, update double. And so this allows you to have the same dynamic functionality without incurring the performance penalty of having to constantly refresh, or the framework having to constantly sit there and refresh the virtual DOM. All right, sorry, that was a long way to get there, but this operator, super cool. Highly recommend using it. All right, let's go back to our application. Yeah, but point is, all this stuff is super accessible on the Svelte website. If you go to REPL, so this is your virtual Svelte environment that you can use. And then if you go to tutorials, basically everything we're going to cover today, and then a whole bunch more stuff is available through here, syntax information, and how to do other basic things. But we're going to go with the NPM method. Oops. Because this will let us do it command line. We're going to need to make that way bigger. Come on, bigger, bigger. Anybody know how to make WSL bigger? WSL Windows Subsystem for Linux. Okay, let's see. All right, we will. Hey, food's here, guys. All right, sweet, thanks, Justin. So what we're going to do is we're going to run our installation command that we did just copy from here. And this will run the npm Svelte script. Is it going to not copy and paste for us? Okay. All right, cool. It's not going to copy and paste. We'll just do it. npm, oh, copy and paste a few times now. And so now it's going to ask us whether we want to do a demo project or a skeleton project. let's go ahead and do a skeleton project and we'll start from scratch. And then if you guys are doing this at home, you could also do a demo project and then kind of see the beginnings of Svelte. And you can choose to use TypeScript or not. I'm not going to use it because I find TypeScript to be a pain, but there are a lot of good reasons to use it. It forces static typing and makes your code more clean. So for production, I would probably use it, but for here, we're not going to do that. And then you can add linting, a formatter, which works only somewhat. It splits up some pages and HTML tags in a way that makes them not work. All right, and then we just do an npm install. Ooh. Oh wait, we got to go in the directory and then npm install. And we can actually take a look at what that is going to install for us. VS Code. Check back with our. Whoop, sounds good. We can hear you. Also heard the Svelte. Oh, sweet. Thanks, Tom. Hey, Mason, good call on that, by the way. That is how you do it in line. So if we were to go back for that, I think you're right. Let's go ahead and test this out for Mason real quick. So, or for me, really, but that's fine. Okay, so if we do it right here, yeah, let's. What character was that, Mason? Oh, just. Good. Okay. Let's go back to the example. Hey guys, by the way, if y'all want to start getting food, it is back there. I won't feel bad. There's various Jimmy John sandwiches and water in the cooler. Meanwhile, I will get us to back to the. All right, cool. I'm sorry? I do. Yeah, but so these are all Windows. So there's actually a Linux distribution right within Windows. That's what WSL is.
I just like the commander.
There's some things it doesn't do. So one thing I can do with WSL is I can run Docker containers that, in Windows. So I have to do that a lot. So okay, so let's see if this counts. Okay. Awesome job, Mason. You win. Absolutely right. That is the syntax. So we define that it's a function that we're not going to pass anything into, and then we put the function in here. Yeah, I definitely should have known that. This is standard JavaScript. Thanks again, Mason. All right. Yep. Oops. Okay, cool. So now that we have our application, we were going to look through package.json. In package.json, you can see there's not a lot. There's just this auto adapter thing, Svelte Kit, and then Svelte itself. Now, this kit part is kind of what allows us to do the server-side stuff. And then this adapter auto is where it tries to figure out what adapter you want for export. For example, whether you want a static adapter or Node.js. And I believe the auto one supports those two. There are also like Vercel and other deployment adapters. So for those that want to, have a different deployment system, it's pretty plug and play. So then let's take a look at what this builds from the beginning. Obviously, we have our node modules that include all this, and then we have a source directory that includes all our source code and a static directory that has all our static files like our favicon. So if we look under the source, we have a directory called routes. Now, Svelte has built-in routing, and that's like, it does some really cool things that I'll show you guys in just a second. But at the base, it is HTML with JavaScript code that gets compiled, into HTML and JavaScript code. And then there's this app.html page, and this is the default wrapper for Svelte. Basically, we're using this key replace here for svelte.body. There's also svelte.head. So if we wanted to run this right now, all we'd have to do is npm install to make sure everything is in there, and then npm run dev. And this will run a development environment at port 3000 for us. Hey, built Svelte Kit. There we go. With this or with the IDE? Actually, with both of those, it would be possible. Not that soon. Sorry. Okay. You're welcome. Sorry about that. And then we can make this bigger too. So let's say I wanted to put something in the head. I could pass that on in my index file. So this index file .svelte gets that's the root of the website. Now Svelte uses a lot of convention, which is super cool. So for example, if I wanted to have a directory, let's say called lunch options, and then in there I put in a index.svelte new file. Okay. Oh yeah, that's the problem. I made this a file. Okay, new directory. Launch options. And then new file in here, index.svelte. I can then go to launch options, and it will load my index.svelte. Let's say I want to have a file called some kind of dynamic title .svelte. It will take that slug. I can then use that slug later in my code to determine what dynamic thing I just pulled up. So, or something. So it still pulls up that page. So now if I wanted to, let's say, take that slug and I wanted to do something with it, I need to now pass it in as a prop and then do stuff with it. So the way that you pass it in, I believe it's let's slug. Okay, so we're gonna do a little bit more work to get this in. We're gonna create another file, slug.js. And slug.js by default will load and output data that can be then imported into Svelte. There will be a body tag where we can pass stuff into the Svelte file, and then the export slug will work. So let me grab the code that I already wrote for this, because and I'm just pulling up the copy I was working with earlier today. And here I have two types of functions. One function is called get, one function is called post. These will intercept the type of requests that match the type of request that you're asking from the browser. and then they will pass this information down to the view page. So it's a way of doing, I guess, model view controller with the routing already, the controller already being handled by the application, and then the model can be handled at the request level. So we're going to take this get request, because that's what we're trying to redo, and update our slug. And so we're already passing in the word request, and this request actually is the request that I guess has all the information for the page load. Sorry about that. Console. So if we take a look at it, request. Okay, this will outrun an output. We can ignore this, and we're not really going to really use this prop. We'll just say respond 200. All this is going to do is just pass status 200 down to our request, and this will be logged server side. So if we try to load something else again, nothing happened on this side, but inside our application, it outputs the contents of the request variable. And inside here, there is a way for us to be able to get the slug that we just entered. There it is, params, slug, something else. So if we would have named it something instead of slug, we could have gotten that. But so now we can get the variable that we need out of it. Oops. So this is our code. Now we want body equal array request dot params dot slug. You may not be able to do that. Maybe like I have to look at this again. Double check that code that was in here. So this is params, and it's a sub object, so it should be accessible. Okay. See what it's. We'll just do is slug, and we will define it here. Let's see. Oh, and then on our page in our slug.svelte, yeah, this should be. I have to export it. We do have to export it. Export. Yeah, okay, that was right. So export let slug, so this should export the slug if there is a slug to export. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we did get the slug back. I had completely blanked. We got it back, but we got it back as a promise, because what we did here was we ran this as an asynchronous function. So if I remove that, we may be able to get access to the slug now. Nope. Okay. Well, either way, what we got is a promise instead of the actual data that we want. And we will, just have to write the data out. So Svelte actually has a way to help with that. So we did pass the Svelte slug, and then in here, if we go do a console log on the slug, it should come back as a promise. And we should get an error, but it should also come back as a promise. Let's see. Won't come back at all. Okay. So let's see. Slug, slug. Are we actually getting this data out of our URL? And even though it's breaking up here, we can see okay, cannot access slug. Okay. Oops. Let's fill it. All right, YouTube, Mason, you got anything for me? Nope. Okay. Why can we not access this? Well, so yeah, I did the demo with a different variable that wasn't part of the fundamental page loading. And I think I may be trying to do something that it's not meant to do because it's part of the initialization. So we may not be able to access it this way. However, I can just pass the request along, which will then eventually bring down the, so if we do request, log, I should get back a promise that includes our, oops, there we go. Yep, so here we got our request, which has the object and also our slug, which is yay, we got it, but why did it not come back as part of, okay, so now we passed it down. So theoretically here, I should be able to do a request dot params dot slug. Let's see if that exists. Yay, we got it. Okay. So it did not like me trying to access the slug itself. However, once I passed the entire request to the front, oops, sorry, this is the wrong one. Once I passed the entire request to the front end, it worked fine. So now if, let's say I wanted to do a let's slug. So now I can output my slug and figure out what page I accessed. Yay. And that's how you do dynamic. So dynamic pages. Super useful if you want to do anything like a blog or anything with dynamic pages. So there's another thing that is helpful that I did in my previous example for today. Let's go take a look at that because I think it's run dev. So in this one, we don't have that subpage, but what we do have is we are also passing this prop. Okay. One other thing you can do as part of this, preloading is you can pass it status. So you can actually pass the 404 this way if they pulled up like some data that's not supposed to be found. So now we're getting a 404. 200. It goes back to loading the page. And in here, we're just passing a random plug, right? You don't have to pass that. You can pass something else. One other thing that we're doing here on the front end that I did not show you, and this is one of the things that I really like about Svelte, is you can handle some of the promise waiting in the UI. So I don't know about you guys, but pretty much anytime you have a prop that's retrieving data, you want to display something that lets you know that there's a prop that's waiting for data, because sometimes that process takes like seconds, and sometimes if your backend is down. Well, so Svelte has a built-in way of doing that. So in this case, we're passing in we're waiting on the prop because we know it's a promise. We can await it, and this is the syntax. You start any conditional with a pound. So if we were to do an if we were to do a for each, it starts with curly bracket, then number sign or pound it. Right? That's what our soul people call it. But, and then your statement. In this case, it's await, and then we can do a then and a catch, and then end the await loop. Now this also works with, if results. Oops. Yeah, autocomplete. And then we end it with a forward slash. So let's see if this comes back with a result. So yeah, result is not defined because the result here is not an actual variable. This is what it sets as the variable that's equal to the value of the prop. So if we wanted to do this, we would probably want to move this code. If we wanted to use this variable in another place, we'd probably have to move it up into our script, define it, pull the variables that we want out of it, and then display it a little bit differently. So, but if let's say we want to do something more normal, we can then so test displays, and then if we set it right, like pretty, whoops, set that to 2, that won't display. So there is, let's check for, oh, never mind. I was gonna see if you were gonna help me with another thing, but we figured out our way out of it. Thanks, Mason. All right, so there's another conditional that's kind of cool. It's a loop conditional. So let's do, I think that should be good. We can then loop through this array using for each, and this var. We don't want to overuse it. Oops, it's not for each. Oh. Okay, well, let me do value. So now this should loop through our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's more you can do here. You can set a second item that has the index. For example, array. Well, in this case, it's a single dimensional array. But if we had a multi-dimensional array, we could then. So it's like that. Apple. Actually, so it's just equal. Anybody remember the syntax? Yeah, that's what I thought it was, but why are you? Nope. Silly. Okay. Well, let's go to the Svelte documentation. Oh, by the way, one thing I didn't mention, you can also style your components this way. And the styling does not, so if you set like inside a nested container, it will only apply to the nested container. So if you set like a P in the root of the file, or I mean the root of the application, it will apply to all the tags in the root of the application. Quite useful. And it, again, it compiles it and makes it fancy. So let's go look at where you want to go. There we go. Updating array and objects. We don't want this one. Oh yeah, this is our prop thing. You said export to declare props, but we want each blocks. There we go. So they like to do this a little bit where they actually don't give you working code so that you have to do a little bit of work, which is super cool. I'm sorry? Is it a? It is a colon apparently, but I should have. What it's doing is actually it's putting. Yeah, it's putting the object components, the subcomponents inside an object. So that's the difference. Is I was doing just a string, whereas this puts the entire object in there. But so let's do it this way because this allows us to do something kind of cool. We'll steal the cats. Thanks, cats. And then now we have a multi-dimensional cats array. And value. The reason why we want to do that is because now, and we'll do cat. We can do a cat.id. And we got to put in parentheses. It's still not. Okay. Let's see. Let's go take a look at cat. Cat. Ah, there. See. So that's exactly what we're doing. Each cat as cat. And now we want, oops, cat.id. No, it's pretty sure it's cat.id because it has to be it's which sub element is the ID of it. Maybe it doesn't like my. Let's go take a look. It's kind of an important thing. Well, let's find the right. Find the right. See if we can do it here. Thing.id. Okay, so works in here. But it also still gives an error. Go find the example of our. There we go. Okay. Oh, there's no comma. I'm sorry, guys. Wow. Okay. My bad. Yay. Okay. So now we have cats and we have cat displaying. So now we got to do cat.name. Sweet. Now our cats are in here. The reason why we want to do this ID is because otherwise, if you want to do work on these, like in this example, let's say so it looks like it's a little bit different. If we remove the first item, you can have things that get out of alignment, because when you're removing an item with this slice, it does not update the unkeyed arrays correctly. What it does is it takes out the HTML element that's responsible for it, but it leaves the content of it. So if you look at the unkeyed, your initial is the same, but then when you remove an item, it starts shifting. However, when you key it to because it removes the last one by default instead of the first one, and so the keying allows you to maintain the list and properly remove the right item off it. So this is important if you're doing a feed and you're removing things from it, like if on a Facebook feed or something, if you wanted to get rid of an item. All right, I think for the last part, I would like to go through and show you an example application that I use that has Svelte in it, and then let you guys ask questions, because this is fun, but Svelte is like a production ready application. Questions? We'll go to Datalus. Oops. Datalus.us, and this is the dev version of my company website. npm run dev. Yay. So this is the mobile version because we're so far zoomed in. But it's basically a website. Now I have a component here that for updates. These updates right now are failing because I don't have a connection to my database. But if I add that connection, cuddle forward, approach operator system, approach db0 25226 Cool. What I just did was just create a connection between me and my database. So now it loads my news. So let me show you how that works on the inside. So this is a very useful real world case of why you would want to use and how you'd want to use this. So under my code, you'll see the same things as we did in the other thing. We have an app.html, we have a routes, but I also have a library where I keep some library stuff in there. And then there's a TS, because I do use TS on the front end, and then a global CSS, because I use Tailwind as my CSS framework, and then Daisy UI on top of that. So it just makes it simpler to do things. But the specific updates are all under the updates folder. And in here, you'll see I have a slug.json and a slug.svelte. So I'm not actually using the preloading feature because that didn't exist when I built this. The preloading thing is actually pretty new, where if you just do .json and it lets you load stuff and pass it in as props, that's a new feature that's actually really cool. So for me, I had to do it the old-fashioned way. And so the way that you do it the old-fashioned way in Svelte, you can have something that runs only server side, and you define it by doing a context equal module. So that says that this code will run on the server, whereas code within the script tag will run on the front end. And that's a big, that's a big differentiator. So in my server-side code, you can have a load function, and my load function is synchronous. It grabs data, but it won't stop the load. There's a fetch command that we can pass in. This fetch command is not the same as the npm fetch command. It's like a sub command that comes with Svelte, and it changes the way it works a little bit. But basically, it's similar. You can await it, and you can get your response, your response back. And by the way, here, all I'm doing is I'm pulling my JSON code. And this basically allows me to do it on the front end or the back end. It means that by default, when the page loads, I will have the latest page, but I could also then query and get an update from that page. I'm not currently doing that, but I could rerun that code to constantly, get updates on the client side. Or if I go to a different page and, I can use the single page application portion of it to pull the data on the client side. And here, I get the stuff, I pass it in as props. And then for the server-side code, you do have to define it as a prop as opposed to a body that we were able to do in the direct loading. So this is an indirect way of passing data from the server side to the front end of the application. And here the prop we're passing is update. And in order to read it in, I do the same thing. I have to do an export, let update, and this pulls it in from the server side. And so if you remember in our demo code, I did something similar to grab the prop that we passed from the slug.js. But in here, I'm actually pulling it from the module code in the same file. And then inside the JSON code, I am pulling a Postgres client and asynchronously grabbing a select statement. Basically, I'm grabbing all my updates that were created, really just all my updates ordered by created, that match the ID. So sorry, this is the slug.json. So my index file actually grabs, it's very similar, but it doesn't care about the slug, right? It grabs everything that was created before now. So I can put in future dates in there and grabs it in descending order. And then the specific pages grab where the slug equals, my variable. So I'm passing the URL that I'm actually, so if we look here, my slug is dcoin-market-test. And I'm able to pass that directly to my database by utilizing the word slug, and which we have defined as the name of the file. I can change this. It doesn't have to be slug. It can be variable. It can be, two-step. And then if I call two-step, I will get the same data. So it's very flexible and uses the convention that you give it kind of to set these dynamic variables. All right, we are technically out of time. Anything I can cover more specifically for you guys? I know this is the first time you've kind of saw Svelte, so I hope you take it home and play around with it. I do think it's a better framework because it does less. And it does things at a time. So it does things on compile side that give you more readily usable code that has to do less on load. So every one of your visitors, their browser has to do less. So for low power machines, you have better performance than you would with a React application. Also, it is just technically feels like a better way to do it. I don't know, to do things on the server side and before you actually deploy them than doing them on the client side. But I'm a back-end engineer, so I'm a back-end engineer that sometimes has to do front-end code. And Svelte is a really good middle ground that does the majority of the work, either at compile time or then on the server side, and only then displays to the user the minimum amount of work that has to happen for the application to run. All right, let's see what questions we got from these guys. Okay, Andrew. The ID string made me think that they were simulating a cat on a keyboard. The keyboard cat title primed me to think that, I guess, until I realized there were hash codes for, yeah, YouTube videos. Yep, no, that was funny. Easier, better, and faster. I think that's a good description of Svelte. I'm using it personally because I want to attract the best developers. And the best developers, in my opinion, want to try new things. The ones that are cutting edge. And so that's why I chose for my company to use Svelte, because that's the type of people I want to attract. But it is more difficult to find engineers that know it. And so unless you're learning it yourself, you may have a harder time getting help with it. Although website's super awesome. Also, if you have any questions ever on Svelte, happy to dig my way through it with you. I don't promise to have the answer, as you can tell, but I will help you find it. Okay, cool. Questions, comments? No? All right, sweet. Thanks everyone online for watching, all three of you. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for coming here in person. And yeah, see you guys tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow we do have the online game developer meetup. So for those of you that want to come, and we'll do an all your base in early March to go to a brewery and all drink together. And I think we have a sponsor for that as well. So, all right. Hope you all have a great afternoon. All the best. Signing off and ending. Yeah.